The snow came down in slow, swirling flakes that morning, soft as feathers but relentless as truth. The streets of Chicago were nearly empty, muffled in white, and a gray sky hung low like a ceiling that had lost its light. At the corner of West Harrison and Franklin, an elderly woman shuffled along, her steps unsteady, her wool coat threadbare, her hands hidden inside frayed mittens. Her name was Eleanor Pierce, 78 years old, and that morning, she had exactly $10.23 to her name. She wasn't sure what she'd spend it on. Some bread, maybe milk, or a can of soup if it was on sale. Her fridge was nearly empty, her heater barely working, and the December wind cut through her coat as though it were paper. But Eleanor was not one to complain. She had lived through harder times, the war, the loss of her husband in '72, the long years afterward when she raised her daughter alone and worked nights cleaning offices. A good day, she often said, is one where you wake up breathing and someone somewhere smiles. That morning, she smiled at the cold. Outside the small corner store, a young man was sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. His jacket was too thin for the weather, and his sneakers were soaked through. Eleanor noticed him as she approached the door. She hesitated. Normally, she would have walked by. Not because she didn't care, but because she couldn't afford to. Yet something about the way his shoulders shook made her stop. "You all right, son?" she asked softly. The young man lifted his head. He looked barely 25. His eyes were red, not from tears but exhaustion. "I'm fine," he muttered. "Just trying to get home." Eleanor tilted her head. "Home where?" "Peoria," he said. "Bus tickets $20. I lost my wallet last night. Been walking since." Eleanor's heart clenched. Peoria was more than 200 miles away. "Must be a long walk," she said gently. He gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, you could say that." She reached into her coat pocket and felt the folded $10 bill. Her fingers brushed against the worn fabric of her glove. $10. That was all she had until next week's Social Security check. She thought of the empty cupboard. The can of beans she'd planned to eat for dinner. The milk she'd promised herself as a treat for Christmas. And yet, as she looked at him, his pale face, his trembling hands, the hopelessness in his eyes, something inside her shifted. "Wait here," she said. She went inside the store, her old boots leaving wet prints on the floor. She counted out her last money, $10 for the young man, 23 cents for a small coffee she poured for herself, though she'd barely touch it. Outside, she pressed the bill into his cold hand. "Bus station's 4 blocks down," she said. "This should help." The young man looked stunned. "Ma'am, I can't take this. You don't even know me." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to need help." He swallowed hard, tears welling up. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just get home." She watched as he stood, his hands shaking, and walked off toward the station. She didn't expect to see him again. She didn't even expect to make it home before her legs gave out. But she did, slowly, carefully, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her apartment, the radiator rattled weakly, the kind of sound that promised warmth but delivered little. She wrapped herself in a blanket and sat by the window, watching snow gather on the fire escape. Her stomach grumbled. She sipped water, then smiled to herself. "Worth it," she murmured. It was worth it, and somehow, she believed that. The next morning, Eleanor woke to a knock at her door. It was rare, she hadn't had visitors in months. She shuffled over, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and opened the door. Outside stood a man in a postal jacket. "Mrs. Pierce." "Yes, package for you. I think you've got the wrong address," she said with a tired smile. "I don't order things." He checked the label. "Name says Eleanor Pierce. From, looks like no sender name, just a return address in Peoria." Her brow furrowed. "Peoria," he nodded. "Must be yours. Sign here, please." She took the small box, light, about the size of a shoebox, and closed the door behind her. At her kitchen table, she carefully cut through the tape. Inside, wrapped neatly in brown paper, was a folded letter, a card, and a brand new winter coat. Eleanor unfolded the note, her hands trembling. "Dear Mrs. Pierce, you don't know what you did for me yesterday. My name is Michael Turner. I'd been sleeping on the street for 2 days after losing my wallet and everything I owned. I was heading home after losing my job. You were the first person to see me as a human being. That $10 got me home. My mom cried when she saw me walk through the door. I told her about you. She told me I had to find you. Inside this box is a small thank you, a coat from my mother, and a prepaid card with enough to help through the holidays. You didn't just help me get home. You helped me believe in people again. Merry Christmas. Michael and Carol Turner. Eleanor stared at the card, a $500 gift card to the same grocery store where she'd spent her last $10. Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then she laughed softly, tears running down her cheeks. Lord, she whispered, you work in funny ways. Over the next few days, Eleanor used the card sparingly, some milk, some fresh fruit, even a small roast for Christmas Eve. But she didn't hoard it. She shared. She left bread by her neighbor's door when she knew the young mother next door couldn't afford much. She bought an extra blanket for the old man who slept on the bench near the bus stop. Each act, she said, makes the world a bit warmer. Then, one afternoon in January, she received another letter. It was from Michael again. He wrote that he'd found a new job as a mechanic, was saving up, and wanted to visit her in Chicago. A week later, he arrived. Same street corner, same freezing air, but this time with a car instead of worn-out shoes. When Eleanor opened her door and saw him standing there, holding a bouquet of daisies, she almost didn't recognize him. Mrs. Pierce, he said, smiling wide. It's me, Michael, she laughed, tears shining in her eyes. Well, I'll be. You clean up nice, son. He stepped forward and hugged her tightly. You saved me, he whispered. I mean that, you saved me. She shook her head. I didn't save you, I just helped you stand up. From that day forward, Michael visited often. He fixed her heater, repaired her old radio, even took her grocery shopping. When she insisted she could manage, he'd grin and say, you've done your part, Mrs. P. Let me return the favor. She'd just laugh. You're a stubborn boy. Guess I learned from the best, he'd reply. Winter turned to spring. The snow melted, revealing small buds pushing through cracks in the sidewalk. Eleanor's health began to fade. Not drastically, just little things. Slower steps, shorter breaths, more naps in her favorite armchair by the window. One evening, Michael visited to find her asleep, the sunset spilling gold across her face. He set a grocery bag on the counter, sat quietly, and watched her breathe. When she woke, she smiled weakly. You again. Always me, he said. You don't have to keep checking on me, you know. He smiled. Yeah, I do. They sat for hours, talking about everything and nothing. His new job, her memories of the old neighborhood, the music she used to dance to with her husband in the kitchen. As the light faded, she reached over and took his hand. Michael, she said softly, promise me something. Anything. When you see someone who's cold, or hungry, or just lost, help them. Even if all you have is a little. Do you hear me? He nodded, eyes glistening. I promise. A few months later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. When Michael received the call, he drove to Chicago that same day. In her small apartment, he found a note left on the kitchen table in her familiar handwriting. To whoever finds this, I had a good life. Don't be sad for me. If I had one wish, it's that the kindness we share never ends. E.P. Michael folded the note and tucked it in his wallet. That Christmas, exactly 1 year after she gave him her last $10, Michael stood outside the same corner store where he'd once sat hopeless and freezing. A young woman stood nearby, crying quietly beside a broken-down car. He approached. You okay, miss? She sniffled. My car died. I was supposed to be home by now. I don't have enough for a tow. He smiled faintly, feeling the cold wind bite his cheeks. Hang on, he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a folded $10 bill. Here, he said, it's not much, but it'll help. She hesitated. Are you sure? He nodded. Absolutely. Someone once did the same for me. She took it, wiping her tears. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means. He smiled. I think I do. As she walked away, he stood there in the falling snow, looking up at the gray sky. For a moment, he swore he could hear her voice, soft and kind, carried on the winter wind. "Good boy," it whispered. "Keep it going." Michael closed his eyes and smiled. And in that moment, he understood, kindness never dies. It just keeps passing on, $10 at a time.